it's unplugged whenever you're adjusting it. And the other thing you want to make sure of, especially with common rafters, there's no angle on them. You want it at a perfect 90 degree when you check your saw. Once you've got your saw set up, make sure that it's always getting hooked to the side of the table. We don't want to leave it on top or tuck it underneath, especially because sometimes when it gets put away, it'll still have a spinning blade. When we're getting our lumber, checking it and laying it out, you want to make sure that your square is always set up to the proper dimensions for the slope that you're given. We did the calculations up in class for a 10-12 slope, so I made sure that my square is set that way. Before we start any of our layout, we want to check the crown on our lumber and mark where the crown sits on it to make sure that all our crowns on our lumber is always going up whenever we're cutting our rafters. That way the weight of the roof will straighten them back out. Once that's checked, we can start laying out our actual measurements that we did up in the class. All our measurements are taken off of our model roof bases. With our model roof bases, we come over, we'll measure the span of them, and then we're going to be cutting 5 common rafters. 4 that are attaching to the ridge board, and our last one that's going to be making up our hip end of our model roof base. I came over, double checked my measurements. I had a 14.5-inch run. I did my calculations to figure out that my common rafter length is going to be 18 7/8, and my total common rafter length to the end of the fascia is 26 11/16. Make sure that whenever you're working on your table as well, try and have a clear table. Try not to store tools on top of it because they can get caught by the saw. So to begin, the only time I like to take out my tape is in the first part to measure out my common rafter and my total common. All my deductions that we talked about in class are going to be done using our square afterwards. Okay, so I've got my total common rafter of 26 11/16. I'm going to mark that, and then my 18 7/8 for my common rafter. That's going to mark out my bird's mouth. I'll start right off the bat. And what you want to make sure of when you're laying these out is that that mark is connecting right with the corner of your lumber. Once you've got your square set, double check it that you're still on your correct slope. And the first one's going to connect right with the corner of the board where we measured from. Slide your lumber down, and then you're going right with your common rafter mark. And then after that, you're going to mark your total common. Once you've got those 3 marks on there, you're going to go and you're going to start doing your deductions and your bird's mouth. We'll start with the deduction at the ridge board. When you're deducting for the ridge board, all your calculations are based off of the center line of your ridge board. So what we want to do to make sure of is that if we've got a 1.5 inch ridge board, we're going to be calculating to remove 3/4 of an inch square to our plumb cut. Okay? And if you guys remember from in class, we've got our 2 angles. We've got our plumb angle and our seat angle. And those all come into play where the ridge and the rafter connect and where the seat cut and the wall plate connect. Okay? So we're going to be taking off 3/4 for the top. So I'm going to come up with my square, sliding it down, and I'm just going to try and pick any solid number on here. Makes it easier to work with. So I picked 8. I'm going to come over 3/4 of an inch from that, and that's going to be my actual cut for my plumb cut. Make sure you can differentiate between the 2 of them as to which one you actually want to cut. The next one's going to be our bird's mouth. With our bird's mouth, we almost always have a solid number up here. Our bird's mouth is based off of a wood above plate and then our seat cut. With our wood above plate, we're going to come down, go right on our line, and then we've got 2 3/4 wood above plate is what we've been told based on the drawings. So I'm going to come back 1, 2, and 3/4 inches. And make sure to remember, some of these squares, this one's in 1/10 of an inch. Make sure that you know which one you're talking about, because 1/10 of an inch, you're going to be partway between 2 of the lines. mark your seat cut, and put an X into your bird's mouth to make sure you know what's getting cut out. On the bottom of our rafter, we're going to have a fascia board coming in here. With our fascia board, if we look at this, we'll come around to the other side. Our fascia board sits right on the outside. Our fascia and our projection is based off of the face of this square to the wall. We had a 6-inch projection, so we have got to do a certain amount of deduction and square again to our plumb cut. We're going to take off that 1.5 inches so that the face of our fascia lines up with our plumb cut for our projection to make sure it comes out to a perfect 6 inches. So then now we're going to come down to our total common rafter. That would be right on the face of our fascia. When we're laying this out, you can do it one of two ways. You can bring it back to a solid number like we did last time and come back our 1.5 inches. The way I prefer to do it is I know that on our square, the blade of our square is at 1.5 inches. So if I bring it and I put one side of it tight to that line, I can mark the back side and it'll line up just on our mark like we want it. Once that's marked, we know that our rafter has the total deductions done to it and our bird's mouth laid out. Typically when you're doing this, you can mark this as a template and cut the other 4 rafters. My 4 are already cut, but this one would be my template to cut the next 4. Make sure that's marked. If you get that cumulative error where each one you mark, if you're off a little bit, it can end up being that by the time you're onto that 4th rafter, if you just keep compounding that error, it'll make it so that it's the wrong dimension. Once we start this, we've already set our square, our sawed a square, and then with these, always try and bring it off the end of the table. You don't want to be cutting in between a support because it can end up binding on you and the saw can kick. Come over. If you need to, you can always tack the piece of lumber down to make sure it stops moving on you. Don't drive the nail in all the way because it'll make it easier to pull out later. Now, I'm going to rest my arm on the piece of wood to help give it some stability, and then I'm just going to use my thumb to pull the guard back. It makes it easier to start on an angled cut. I'm going to cut my plumb cut at the top, and then I can pull that nail out so I can flip the piece of lumber around. Okay, any little nails like this, try not to leave on there. We'll toss them under the table, and then I can start cutting my bird's mouth as well. Again, just like last time, I'm going to put my forearm on there and pull the guard back to start that angled cut. When you're cutting your plumb cut on your bird's mouth, it's okay to have a very small amount of overcut. Afterwards, what we'll do is we'll actually clean it up with a handsaw. Okay, again, I'm going to come over. This time I'm using my hand to stabilize it, and I'm going to cut the seat cut of my bird's mouth. Again, with a very little amount of overcut. With this, you can knock it out with your hammer, and we'll finish off that cut later with a handsaw. Last piece we're going to do, we'll flip it around and we're going to cut for our fascia cut. Okay, just like last time, I'm going to put my forearm on there and I'm going to cut that deduction line that I've got. Okay, I've got my template almost fully cut. I'm going to take any leftovers and tuck them under my table. Now that that's cut, I can set it on there and use my handsaw to cut the rest of the bird's mouth. When you're cutting it, just have a firm grip on it, and you're just going to run it along the cut that you've already got there. cut it on both sides, trying not to overcut. And you're just going to clean it up. Okay, this will make it so that once it sits on your wall plate, it'll sit in there nice and snug. We'll move some of our tools out of the way, and then we can start nailing in that last rafter. We can set our model roof base up onto the table, and we've got our layout there for us to put our last rafter in. Okay, it sits onto the wall plate and up tight to your ridge board. With these, what I'd recommend is somewhere solid, like on the floor, tack a nail into it. That'll make it easier to start. Okay, so we'll start that way. I'm using my hip to hold it tight to my wall plate, and I'm going to hold it up tight to the ridge board, nice and flush and in line with my ridge board. Okay, next, sometimes it can move out on you. Sometimes you'll have to tap it back in to get it nice and tight to your wall plate. With these, because we've got only 2 inches of meat here, we can take a 3-inch and tack it into the wall plate and then do our 2 toenails to hold it in. So again, just going to pull it in tight and nail it down. Okay, that'll tack it there for us for now. Grab another nail and toenail it into the plate. Do one from the other side as well. And then we can do our toenails into the ridge board. Sometimes it can move on you. You might have to tap it back, or when you put your second toenail in, you can also push it back to where it has to sit. Okay, when you're installing these, you want the tops of them nice and flush. So once we run our sheathing on top of this, we'd be able to run nice and flush over the top, and it'll meet in the middle. Once you've got that installed, and the 5 others, your ridge board, you'd be ready to start doing hips and your barge boards after that. Is there any questions on any of this? All right, so everybody can grab a model roof base, get some lumber and a ridge board, and start cutting their own.